Well, hello there YouTube, and welcome to another portrait painting tutorial live. So today we are going to continue this one. It is hopefully at this point completely dry, and if it's not, then it's not. You'll see what happens if it's not completely dry, but it'll all be okay. So the first thing to talk about when it comes to painting the fine details in a portrait is the materials. So in this stage, the materials are going to be very crucial. It's crucial in every stage, but in this stage it's even more crucial. So hello there, Menno, Canvas Dancer, Stephanie Thompson, welcome to the stream. Alright, so we're going to add a different element to this painting medium wise. So what I have in this container is a 50-50 mix of a solvent and cold pressed linseed oil. So it is very important that when you enter into the more refined stage of your painting that you have a medium that will allow you to work a little bit longer. So again, 50-50, cold pressed linseed oil and a solvent. The solvent that I used is spike lavender, but you could use Gamsol if you want to, or turpentine if you use turpentine. Whichever solvent you use is totally up to you. So there's a couple ways to apply the paint onto your dry painting. One way would be if you just go and paint directly wet into dry. But as you notice here, there's some parts that are very kind of opaque looking, almost very grayish. So that means, hey Leah, what that means is that the colors have sunken in, which means that the previous layer of oil paint has absorbed the oil of this layer of paint. Since this is already toned with oil paint, there was already a ground here, and there was a painting underneath that, but don't worry about that. So this is one layer. This has two layers, so now we have three layers on the painting here. So what happens with oil paint is that the oil gets absorbed by the previous layer, and what's left over here needs a little bit of oil so that it is lighter, or not lighter, it is darker, and the colors are closer to what they were when the paint was wet. So there's two ways to go about this. One is to oil out, which means applying the oil to everything. The other is to apply a couch. So oiling out and applying a couch are two terms that we are going to take a look at. Oiling out means that you add the oil to the entire painting. So you add the mixture to the entire painting. But the entire painting is not covered yet with color. So it might not make sense to oil out the painting or to add all of the oil to the entire painting. So what would make sense then is to apply a couch. So what is a couch? It is a piece of furniture that you sit on and watch TV or YouTube. No, it's not. A couch in this definition is when you oil out only the segments that you are going to work on. So in this case, this is the segment that we're going to work on. Even though this is just raw umber, I can still add oil to it and it would be perfectly fine. So we're going to go to the palette here and we're going to add the medium onto the brush. Let me see if I missed any questions. Hi Tipu. Hey Leah. You always have a hard time with shadows on the faces. Shadows, light and shadow is about 90% of the battle when it comes to trying to get especially lightness in a portrait. So now that we have the brush loaded with the stuff, let me show you what it looks like. So from a distance you can see this has already darkened this relative to this. In a close-up you'll probably see it even more. So now look at the difference between this and this. So we're going to apply the oil to everything that we're going to work on. So we're applying a couch. And a couch is just a classical term. You could say you're just oiling out the section that you're going to paint on, and that means the same thing. So applying it to everything. Cold pressed linseed oil is a slow dryer relative to Neo-Megilp medium, which is the medium that I was using before. If you recall the last stream, I actually didn't even use Neo-Megilp medium on this. So now what we have is going to be a very slower drying layer relative to all the other layers, which didn't have any medium at all. One thing to mention, now that I have added the medium to this layer, is that when you do this, you want to make sure that your painting is flat by the end of the day. So get your panel or your canvas, find somewhere safe to put it so a cat doesn't step on it or kids don't put cups on it or whatever, and just lay it flat. Even though we're going to add another layer of paint to this, it could be that the paint will dry or the medium will dry into little droplets that you'll see. And if that happens, it's not a big deal. You can just get a palette knife and scrape it off. It's really not that big of a deal if that happens to you. But that happens to some of my students, and it does concern them, and it is important to mention that that could happen. So right now what I'm doing is I'm going through my little plastic bag full of paint brushes, and I'm going to select two brushes in particular that I want to use for this, or let's just say three. I'm going to want a round brush and two cat's tongue sables. So I've got them in hand here. So remember what I do, since I paint pretty much every day except for Sunday and Monday, is in between painting sessions I'll actually put the brushes in a plastic bag, and I will seal the plastic bag, not airtight, but I seal it with a hair tie. So a hair tie, and that cuts off some of the oxygen to the brushes. Another thing you could do is get your brushes and dip it into some kind of oil if you want to, but I prefer to do it this way because what I do is I just put this in the freezer and it keeps the brushes pretty good. I had some brushes that were like a month, that were like that, kept like that for like a month, and I was still able to use them. They were perfectly fine after cleaning them very rigorously. So now I'm just going to mix up a skin tone, and I'm just going to start off with something basic, and I'm using a Sable right away. So this is a size 5 pure red Sable cat's tongue. Brushes really matter when it comes to the fine details. I cannot emphasize this enough. I used to just use whatever. I would just go to Michael's and buy whatever was on sale, and that was what I used for many years. And then I learned differently. I learned that brushes do matter, and Sables in particular are really nice because yes, they're very soft. As you can see, it's a very soft touch, but they do pick up quite a lot of paint, which is a really nice thing, a nice property to have. So we're going to pick up in some little obscure area just to warm up. You never want to just go right for something very difficult. You want to choose an area in the painting to warm up. And I think I'm going to choose maybe somewhere around the smile line of the cheeks. So let's see if I missed a question. Hey Tipu, you like the long-haired brushes? Where can you buy these? So I would go to Jerry's Artorama, and there are no stupid questions, don't worry, as long as it's art related. So you can go to Jerry's Artorama if you are in the US. If you're not in the US, then Jackson's would be another opportunity or solution for you. So Jerry's Artorama or Jackson's would be the best place to buy these kinds of brushes that I use. And I'm not sponsored by any brand, so I'm not just telling you this for the sake of you to buy the product. I'm just telling you. So let's see. Oh, I missed a comment from Menno. You don't have a couch. I don't have a couch either, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. I just got a bunch of chairs. Hey, LRZ. Why is your palette so loaded with paint? How do you prevent all of that to dry, or do you plan on using them all in one go? Good question. Some of them did dry, and that's inevitable, but one nice thing about this palette is that it is the 12 by 16 size. So for example, those of you that paint a lot, a 12 by 16 palette is actually pretty neat because it fits in a Masterson Stay Wet box. I should probably type that up. If I remember, I'm going to have that typed up for you. But it's just called a Stay Wet box. It's spelled S-T-A and then wet and then box. So it just fits right into this little box, and it's close to airtight. It's not perfectly airtight, but it keeps the paints from drying too much overnight. Another thing about having a cluster of paint like this is some layers underneath are dry. The layers above are wet, or at least mostly wet. When oil paints dry, this is a good question actually. When oil paints dry, you'll notice that it actually starts to form a film. It dries around the outside of the blob of paint, but if you kind of stab into it with a palette knife or with your brush, there's actually wet paint underneath of there. So when you have big blobs of paint, it actually dries more slowly. So these will dry more slowly because there's big blobs of paint than if they were little tiny pieces of paint. The thinner you spread out the paint, the faster it's going to dry. The more you clump it up, the slower it's going to take to dry. So that's why I have that little system there. So let's see if I missed any other comments. Nope, I didn't. No, let's go back to the palette because that color that I mixed was too pink. And this painting tutorial in particular is going to be more focused on fine detailed, very structured forms. So as a result, I'm going to probably show you the palette a little bit less than last time, but if you have any questions about the color, I'll be perfectly happy to answer that. Let's take you to the close-up. So when you add the cold pressed linseed mixture with the spike lavender, and they would be the same effect with Gamsol, there's something very solid about the way the paint layers onto the surface. You can get, especially when you have a smooth panel. This is a ampersand panel, very smooth, and it's layered with lead white oil paint. I used lead white along with my other colors. So there's something very special about the way this layers. It's like a smooth stone kind of feel to it. Very unique. Unlike, say, doing an alla prima on a cotton canvas, it's a completely different feeling. And it's solid. The paint feels very solid yet silky, and it just flows really, really nicely, especially if you use a loaded brush, because the paint will interact with the layer that you have on the surface, and this is what you want, to have a very fine touch. See here, there's going to be a plane change ever so slightly from the top side of the eye socket as it moves towards the back side of the eye socket. Yep, no problem, LRZ. Hey, Menno. Oh, good. I'm glad that you bought Cerulean Blue. It's a really nice color. I use it all the time. You wouldn't think that a face would require Cerulean Blue. I'm going to use it right now. It's a really nice, weak blue, not very high tinting strength. So it's excellent for those bluish tones, or just something that's slightly cooler. Now when I say that I'm warming up, it means that I'm working in a spot in the painting that's not as demanding. So everything in the portrait in a face is going to be demanding, but for example, the rendering of the corner of the eye socket to me is not as complicated as the rendering, say, in the eyeball or the lips. And in the online classes, I call this the impossible subtleties. It's so subtle, it feels like it's impossibly subtle. And you have to be, the terminology is, you have to be on the form. You have to be constantly thinking about the form. Each plane change should be indicated by a value change, but also, when you're painting with color, each plane change also becomes a color change. The photo reference at this point is practically useless. I look at it for to know what the object is, but not how to describe it. The way I describe it is based on my knowledge of structure and color relationships from previous painting sessions. In particular, painting from life, whether it's painting other models or self-portraits. These days, I learn more from self-portraits than I do from painting from live models because I don't really have the opportunity to paint from live models every day. But I tend to frequently appear when I look at a mirror. For some reason, my reflection shows up on the mirror, so sometimes I find that useful to paint from. So the Sable is loaded with a lot of paint, but each mark is very gentle. I don't want huge clumps of paint. And now this section of the eyes practically finished. Very little trouble. And that's because the layers underneath were enough to guide these more finesse layers. So we got a question or a comment. LRVZ. We've gathered a bunch of materials for oil painting: Zorin palette, brushes, panels, with canvas. Let's see, but you've never painted oil. Done oil painting. What terrifies you is handling the paint / the palette, and no one shows that part. I'll show you right here. I mean, I'm not really holding the palette. I usually do. I usually hold the palette here, but just mix as you please. You don't have to worry about it drying right away on your palette. And any new endeavor is going to give people a sense of anxiety. And since oil painting is new to you, and to everyone else watching, if oil painting is new to you, just know that there is going to be some anxiety attributed to it, but it's not going to be that way forever. The more comfortable you get with the medium, the less nervous you will be. In terms of the safety now, oil painting is perfectly safe if you keep the paints away from your mouth, away from your hands, and you're fine. Just keep it away from your skin and you'll be fine. When you use solvent, for example, solvent is the most dangerous part about oil paint. Notice I don't even have this open. So I keep my Gamsol, my odorless mineral spirits, in the smallest glass container, or the smallest container that I possibly can, because I don't need a lot of Gamsol at a time. This right here is the only thing that you have to worry about when oil painting if you're keeping your hands out of the paint. That is because odorless mineral spirits is a petroleum distillate. However, if you use spike lavender oil like this, spike lavender oil is non-toxic. It's perfectly safe for the air around you. If you have children or something like that and you're afraid of the toxicity in the air, then just get spike lavender and your studio will smell like a spa. So it's kind of a win-win. Hey Deborah, welcome. Can I discuss blending? So certainly. Blending, if you mean the making the surface appear really smooth and dimensional, that all depends on two things: color and value. ALRZ. Oh, you have 5 cats. Okay, that might be difficult to keep the cats away from the painting. Yes, ventilation is always good. Good pointer. Make sure you have plenty of ventilation. And if you don't have that much ventilation, it'll be fine. You can get an air purifier, although don't quote me on that. Ventilation is always a good idea. So when it comes to, for example, what I'm doing here, which you may consider to be blending, and that's alright. See, what I'm doing is I'm mixing each shape. Each shape that I add, I'm mixing, and in between the shapes, they're like little puzzle pieces, right? So maybe they're like it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Pretend these are the shapes of the jigsaw puzzle. I have to mix up each individual value, but in between them, I can do like a little cross-hatching thing and soften the edges between them very cautiously, though. That's only maybe like 1%, or maybe like at most 5% of making something look realistic. So I've just mixed up, well, not done mixing it, but I'm mixing up a dark neutral-ish red for the tear ducts. And you can think of this similar to cooking, similar to a dish of some sort, where yes, there are recipes, and if you're working in a kind of paint by number system, you can get the exact color every time if you really work for it. But you don't need it. Just like when you're cooking, you kind of, depending on how you cook, like if you're like a really, I don't know, like if you're a upper echelon chef, then you probably follow, I don't even know, I'm not going to even pretend to be like a cook, but from the little cooking that I know how to do, I know that I learn a recipe, and then after I learn the recipe, I just kind of go by feel. It's not as demanding. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of going by feel. Now the tear duct is a very specific value. And unfortunately, the photo reference is absolutely pointless when it comes to the true value, the true color. So looking at this from a distance, this is too dark. I'm pushing the contrast there a little too far. So just using the colors on the palette, I'm just going and looking for something that's a little bit lighter, and I'm using that to very gently push the values. Let's turn you over to the other camera shot. So this is where the challenge of subtlety happens, because yes, this needs to get dark, but does it need to get as dark as this? And is this too light? This is why I call it the impossible subtleties in the online classes, because everything is impossibly subtle. So I'm going to use a round brush. I'm going to mix up a dark for the eyelash, Ultramarine Blue, Alizarin, burnt Sienna, Viridian, a little bit of Indian yellow, let's see if I missed any questions. Hey Blue Sky, a question from Deborah. Do you find using a canvas with more tooth easier or harder in getting incredibly realistic smooth, or getting realistic smooth finish? Is a smooth finish useful for more realistic work? Oh, thank you for your compliment. And I'm gonna have to go with a smooth finish is better for a realistic painting. That's because with a smooth surface like this one, the think about it, I hate to use the word pixels, but think about it like pixels a little bit. The more texture you have in your painting surface, also called a support, the more texture you have on your painting support, the more pixelated it will be. So the more texture, the more pixelated. The less texture, the less pixelated it will look. And with a surface like this, and an underlayer like this, I can probably take this further than any of my previous portrait paintings in the past. Every time you paint, you always will learn something. You retain some kind of information, whether it be you're conscientious about it, or it's subconsciously there. In particular, I think about Nelson Shank's paintings. He's my superhero. I always mention him. If you haven't heard of Nelson Shanks, look him up. He is my superhero when it comes to painting. Hey Tipu, the resolution of my video is set for my computer and internet streaming, though it shouldn't be 480p, I guess. If that is, then that's unfortunate, but that's what I've been using because of my internet speed and camera equipment. More the internet speed. Hey ALC, thank you. Hey Mano. Yep, you will find your own preferences, just like in cooking. Standing back is crucial in this stage. So after standing back, I realized that I should probably add more light to the surrounding shapes now, because everything is a little bit dark, and I should have a background tone coming in really smooth. Alright, so you see the painting from a distance. Go to the palette. I'm gonna have to check the settings on my computer. I can't do it while I'm streaming, but I'll see if there's a way I can bump up the resolution. The close-up camera will look the most distorted to you because the close-up camera is actually the same camera angle as this, but I used my software to zoom it so you can see it a little bit more, but it will look a little grainy. Okay, so for the frontal ridge of the skull, this is a very important anatomical area to look at. So I need something darker, a little bit more of a dulled out pink. Right here, there is a plane change that is very important to describe. I apologize for the glare on my palette. Hey Libertas. Now one thing I can do, and I probably will do, for the sake of the resolution, is move the camera a little closer. I'm going to have to adjust my close-up shot, but we'll see if we can give that option a go in just a second here. Now when colors get too warm, that's where Cerulean Blue can be very useful. So I'm pushing the form, and even with a large brush like this one, the fine detailed work can still be very precise. This is a size 4 extra long filbert brush by the Silber Brush Grand Prix series. I'm adding more form to the glabella. AALC. So yeah, rendering or turning form like this is a very delicate thing. Each plane change is very individualized. Oh, hey, thanks for the super chat, Stephanie. Thank you. You know what time it is then? It's super chat Grumpy Cat time. So thank you so much from Stephanie Thompson. Thank you for the birthday wish as well. Yeah, my birthday was great. My wife took me out to a sushi restaurant that evening, so it was pretty good. And super chat Grumpy Cat makes it into a portrait painting tutorial close up for your Grumpy Cat. Thank you so much, Stephanie Thompson, for the super chat. As per the super chat, Grumpy Cat says thank you. Super chat Grumpy Cat can even hold a brush and say thank you. The super chat helps so much. One of these days, I'll be able to upgrade my computer and internet speed. One day. And everything has to do with, when it comes to rendering, everything has to do with control. The best materials will give you the most control, but just because you have the best materials doesn't mean that it's going to automatically make you a better painter. It's just a starting point. ALRVZ. Let's see. Don't know how references work. Can you get a photo from anyone, paint it, and sell it? Would it be copyright infringement or something if it's not paid? Well, for most references, as long as you're not using the reference as like a collage of some sort, then you'll probably be alright. For example, if you're talking about like Crocus Cafe or those sources where they have images of models to paint from, usually they'll say that as long as their the picture itself isn't being displayed, then it should be fine. If you use a copyright-free resource like Unsplash or Pexels, then you don't have to worry about copyright at all. Now, if you're doing a painting, oh, can you legally sell it? You should be able to. Unless, okay, so here's where it gets tricky. If you're using a picture of, say, Will Smith or something like that, and you paint it and sell it, you'll probably be okay, but legally you might get in trouble if you are replicating painting that someone did of Will Smith, for example. So As long as it's from a picture that the paparazzi took or something like that, that's for the public use, so legally you shouldn't have any problem. However, here's where I'm going to say I am not a lawyer, so I can't tell you with utmost certainty, but I can tell you very likely you'll be fine. Yeah, very likely you'll be perfectly fine. Alright, so now with the face, we've got a little more structure going on here. I'm gonna push the shadow a tad bit further before I get into the hair. So I'm gonna just kind of remix that color. It's somewhat of a burnt sienna, Viridian. Use Indian yellow. Make it a deeper green. Take some of whatever that was. And before I make any adjustments, I'm going to move the camera. If the screen goes dark, by any means, do not worry. It just means that my cable is very sensitive and gets disconnected. Also, take note that the camera is at an angle with respect to the painting, so it's going to look a little distorted. Okay. Moving you up closer. And I'm adjusting the zoom for you. Or the focus, that is. Okay. Alright, so now you're closer. Yep, no problem. LRVZ. Okay. So I'm going to stand back again. And we're going to keep working on that eye to our right. It's all so subtle. So, especially with portrait painting, everyone that is trained in the same method can kind of start the same. Your painting, or say my painting, may not look that different from other painters' paintings until we get to the later stages like this. The further along you get in the refinement of the painting, the more your individual style, or I guess let's just use the word style, the more your style will be evident. I myself don't notice, or even, I'm not even aware of what my style is. I don't think about it. But it's more evident the further along I get in the painting. Now, not everything should be ultra smooth. So this is where it's going to get kind of difficult. Some areas should remain a little more rough. Now I can easily go too far and lighten that too much, so I have to stand back. It has to make sense from a distance, so that means, if that means standing back and moving all the way across the room, then that's what it's going to take. A little closer to the painting now, and we're going to examine the tear bag. So anatomically speaking, the tear bag area is right under there. If I make that too red or too violet or too dark, it's going to look like she was punched in the face. So I have to be very cautious with this. And it's one area where less is more is certainly important. First thing I'm going to do is darken it slightly. Now, this is very much describing, attempting to describe the structure of the model's eye. The more you make decisions based on form, the less obscure and the more realistic your painting will be. Stop looking at the reference and painting exactly what you think you see in the reference, but understand it. And get yourself the best brushes that you can. Sables are what you want for fine details. Don't settle for anything less, because you deserve it. You deserve to have the best materials. Another name that comes to mind for me is Bouguereau. Try to imagine what Bouguereau would do with the eyes. And once again for the tear bag, there's a curvature over here. If you can think of it, the topography, it goes down, 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 flat, up, 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 flat, kind of like at an angle, slope, 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 and then it stops here. Start to move up, curve down. Here it curves down too, but it's more subtle. So here it curves down, but it's nearly flat. And then here it starts to curve inwards slightly, ever so slightly. And then it picks up light. So none of this is simple to describe. LRVZ. Yeah, rosemary is a type of brush similar to Silver Brush, the brand that I use, which is one of the most highly recommended brushes. I hear many good things about rosemary brushes. I just haven't personally purchased them. Oh, don't worry about ruining the brushes. Get yourself the the Masters soap. I'm gonna see if my microphone extends all the way to the bathroom. So I am walking towards my cleaning area. This is the furthest I've ever been from the painting and still talking to you. I'm gonna get the lid. So if you want to preserve your brushes, the very best soap you can get is this one. So the Master's Brush Cleaner. So this is just the lid though. There's more to it than that, but the Master's Brush Cleaner and Preserver. I buy the bar soap and the preserver. The bar soap is like shampoo and the preserver for me is like conditioner. And if you're wondering why the panel keeps shaking, it's because my computer is actually right underneath of the painting. So here's where it's going to get darker. Add a bit of a curve there. Right over here, it starts to pick up light. Now it's going to look incomplete until I describe the curvature completely. Color-wise, this is very intuitive. The colors are very sporadically mixed, as you see there. So I'm just going for whatever is the correct value. Now the best way to improve on your rendering, your describing of form on the face is going to be self-portraits. And remember what I mentioned before, one of the biggest problems that beginners face with portraiture is not differentiating the fact that it's a painting of a person and not a person. You're thinking of it too much as a human being, which is great. I mean, ethically that's awesome, but in a painting, thinking about the person instead of the painting will only get in your way. So portrait painters learn to differentiate or even disassociate from the model. They don't care who they're painting. It doesn't matter to them. They don't even think about it as a person. They're looking at shapes. They're looking at colors and values. So if you can get to a point where you can paint self-portraits from a mirror and it doesn't bother you, then you have reached a level in your painting of which you're no longer thinking about a human face. You're thinking about shapes, values, and colors. Which is why self-portraits are a big part of my online classes. ALRVZ, yeah, there's many factors to oil painting. But definitely don't worry about the aesthetics. Like with self-portrait, especially as you mentioned. Here's that very difficult little jump that's going to be very difficult. Now, here's a word of advice. If I leave this as a value change, it's going to look like she got punched in the face. So what I have to do is go for a color change and not a value change. So I'm going to change it to more of a pinkish, bright pinkish. That is in the same value family. I'm talking about this little bridge in particular. So the subtlety is so tight that the values end up becoming the same, and the only thing that changed was the color. Now we're going to move on to the other eye as it's requiring some attention. Hey Stephanie, haven't been brave enough to paint a self-portrait. Don't worry, you'll get there. Let's start off with the dark of the eye. Whoops, that was a mistake. So don't clean your brush in the medium. In fact, I'm going to just cover that. Bad move, bad move. I'm going to cover this. I really don't need any more medium. Another word of advice, this is very important. If you have a wooden palette that you love, do not leave a palette cup on your palette. Say it with me. Do not leave a palette cup on your palette. Because as tightly sealed as they are, this will still somehow tend to leak some solvent. And if you have solvent leaking onto your palette, that's not good for the wood of the palette. So yeah, don't do that. So that's why I use this glass one. I just got to clean this brush out. Let's use Cobalt Blue. At this point I don't need any extra solvent, or excuse me, any extra medium. So, question from LRV. Would you recommend starting with black and white for getting used to paint handling? Yes, exactly. I would recommend starting with black and white. That is a very clever observation. In fact, I start my students off in monochrome. My students don't just jump into color like this. Eventually they do get to this level where they jump into color, but that's after many projects of building paintings through careful underpaintings. Alright, so the shadow is going to get very tricky. Now that's a plane that's turning very quickly. And a little bit of Cerulean Blue helped me go from too warm to just right, just warm enough. I gotta say, I feel like this is my biggest passion when it comes to painting is faces. For some reason, painting faces has always perplexed me, confused me, and as a result made me very determined to learn how to do it. But painting is a lifelong pursuit. That's why it's important to always have the best, excuse me, the best teachers. Now, I have been very fortunate to have the teachers that I've had in my lifetime. I would not be able to do or paint how I'm painting today without those teachers. Okay, so I'm gonna stand back again. Now we're gonna paint the tear bag area for the other eye. And it's kind of a warm grayish. And underneath of it there's a greenish plane change. Are you gonna bring all that in now? Oh. Let's stand back a little bit. See if I missed any questions. So let's see. LRVZ. In the long term, is the goal always to make painting collections to put on a gallery, like 10 plus pieces, or single paintings, maybe online? Well, traditionally, yeah, you want to make a series of paintings that will go well together in a gallery. I am currently attempting to do that with my studio paintings that I'm doing. But you can make individual paintings for online promotion like Instagram and all those things. But yes, ideally you want your paintings to kind of go together. However, just like with style, don't think about it, like don't let it be something that you have to ponder about for years or months or whatever. Don't let style determine how you paint, but let style be determined by the way that you paint. For example, studio paintings that I'm working on, they're very complex. There's a lot of still life, there's a lot of things in them, and there's always people in them, always portraits in them. But there's the added element of reptiles in my studio paintings because I love reptiles. I just ended up painting them without even thinking about it, and that's the way it should be. Your own style, your own voice is not something you have to go and find. It's something that's already within you. You just need the methods to express it. Okay, so let's move into the nose and the mouth. And with the nose, the shadow area is the most telling of the curvature of the nose. So we're gonna go the darks. And for anyone that's interested, this painting will be available for sale, just like the bell pepper that I finished like 2 weeks ago. I do intend to put a background in, just a single value or a single color. Now for the penumbra, meaning the edge of the cast shadow, the closer the shadow is to the object that is projecting the cast shadow right here, the sharper that edge is going to be. You can actually notice it if you look at the shadow of my brush. See this? See how much sharper that is? This edge right here on the cast shadow? See, the further you get away, this is the penumbra, the softer it gets. You can apply the same effect in your painting. See here, this is sharper and it gets softer. And that's what makes a shadow really look like a shadow, among other things. And yep, I would agree, the nose does give a lot of character. I believe I locked in the nose kind of earlier on in this one because of the angle. The head is mostly centered, but it's slightly 3/4, which is one of the worst angles to have because it's so subtle. Alright, so for the mouth, I'm going to lock into the darks also. You'll notice a trend here with the subtleties. The darks tend to describe the form the best. So this halftone is very dangerous. It's dangerously close to the shadow, but it is lighter because it's not in the shadow. And it could be that one little section there is in the shadow, but I'm going to ignore that, at least for now. The top plane of the lip is more chromatic. Also dark. Now with the lip we have to give more form. Be careful not to make the lips too sharp either. I'm gonna have to go in with another brush and blur that edge out a little bit. A good brush for that is this beat up brush with some medium on it. I don't know why it has medium. Must have spilled somewhere. Now there's more of a curve to the lips that I didn't quite capture before. Now remember, since the camera is at an angle, this curve is going to look more curvy. So, question from Menno. The drawing part, let's see, the drawing part in the first color layer went fast, but this part takes the most time? Yes. It can all take a long time, but yes, this detailed, refinement stuff, yeah, this is what will take the most time. I'd say like 90% of the time, this stage takes the most time. And it depends. If it's your first time rendering a face to the nth degree, trying to make it as realistic as possible, then it'll potentially take you longer. The better you get at it, the less time it'll take. The more you learn, the longer each new stage will take. So it's a balance. And also the fun part, yeah, it can be the fun part. If you try not to do it all at once, it can be the most fun part. There's a optimum painting time where you're the most focused, the most concentrated, have the least amount of distractions. Everyone is different. Everyone will have a different kind of optimum concentration time, but for me, it's somewhere within the first hour that I'm painting. After the first hour, maybe painting for 2 to 3 hours, I start to lose focus a little bit. And for that reason, I like to have distractions when I'm painting. So I usually have Netflix playing or something in the background. I cannot emphasize enough. Go for the darks. Describe the darks. Now you can see the difference in individual areas. You can see how this has much more form now than this or than that. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go ahead and remix the shadow, and we're going to use that to move our way towards the dark values for the hair. So I used Viridian and burnt Sienna and whatever was already on the brush. I'll add a little more blue to it. Cerulean Blue. We'll attempt to leave it so that next time all we have to do is add, I guess, the neck and the shoulders and some of the background, and it will be done. So we're doing all the hard stuff before that, though. I'll zoom you out for a second. Now I'm moving through this a little faster. I usually will try to vary the color in the shadow from one plane to the next. But for the sake of time, I'm just kind of sketching it in there. And now we're going to mix up some of the dark for the hair. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. Now I'll use dioxazine. Dioxazine purple, that is. Indian yellow to dull down the purple. Viridian. We'll dull down the Viridian with Alizarin. And I shouldn't need to add any medium because of the linseed oil mixed with the solvent that we put on here. Go for the edges first. And we'll spend the remainder of the time just getting the edges for the hair correct. And I'm going to use the raw umber layer wherever possible for value changes on the hair due to time. I'm just kind of buzzing it into the hairline. Now, usually it works out better if you pull skin tone into the hairline rather than putting the hairline into the skin tone. We have to do a bit of both. And this is going to be the most careful edge of them all. Rarely do I have to mix up the color just for an edge. But we have to with this. Now, if you're not cautious with your hairline edge, it's going to look like the model's wearing a wig. And there's nothing wrong with the wig. You know, fashion is completely individual, but she wasn't wearing a wig. ALRVZ. Oh my god, it's 2:51 a.m. over there. Wow. Thanks for joining us despite the time difference. and use my fan brush. Typically at this point I would be putting in the background color simultaneously, but due to time, since this runs until 9 o'clock p.m., let's say Maryland, USA time, East Coast time, Maryland, I have to be strategic about this. So I'm putting in plane changes in the hair and very subtle adjustments to the hairline, because I know that this is going to read better than if I just go with flat shapes for the background and the hair. So it's just as much about technique, or just as much about strategy for me as it is technique. Now that edge, whoops, there goes the camera. That edge is going to have to be blurred. I'm just getting whatever brush is available to blur that edge for me. Move you to a close-up. And this is that magical point where it starts to look like something. I'd say we're just getting out of the awkward stage. So again, I'm using the layer underneath, pretty much glazing the texture or the brush strokes of the hair. See up there? Now this will probably not be fully dry next time, so we'll be working into this wet over dry, unless by some miracle it dries. But remember, to get the illusion of hair, you need light and shadow and planes. Light, shadow, and planes, and you've got hair. I'm going to zoom you out slightly. I don't want this to dry too thick. So pretty dramatic difference with the addition of the hair. Now it starts to look more human. And that should be about it. It is time. So it's 9 o'clock p.m. Maryland East Coast time. Charles, no worries, no worries. Welcome to the stream. So I always, I try to always have these public YouTube painting sessions Tuesdays and Thursdays between 7:15 p.m. and 9 p.m. Maryland East Coast USA time. I used to say Eastern Standard Time, but I think that changed, so I'm just going to say Maryland time. So we're going to see if there's any last minute questions. I'm going to hang out for just a couple minutes. Hey Tipu, are you going to work some more on the eyebrows? The painting says, oh yeah. Curious as surprise. The reference says, oh yeah, for sure. Definitely. I did not make it to the eyebrows. I didn't even touch them today. But yes, I will work on the eyebrows. Hey Menno, oh thank you. Let me see if I can rotate it for you without dropping my whole setup. You can see it with less distortion. So we're going to hang out for just another minute now. See if there's any last minute questions. Yep, I'll see you again on Thursday, Stephanie. Once again, thank you so much for the super chat. I am so grateful. Grumpy Cat is very grateful also, so thank you for the super chat. Hey Tipu, yeah, it was the camera distortion. Alright, so I don't think there's any more questions. Thanks again, everyone, for watching this live. Remember, if you are watching this a little bit later, don't worry, this is going to be available for you to watch as a pre-recorded video once the stream ends. And I've also enabled live chat replay, so you'll be able to watch the chat unfold as if you were watching this live. So once again, if you find my videos to be helpful and informative to you, please consider checking out my online classes on patreon.com/upariartist. Also typed out for you as the pinned comment, the top comment in the chat section, and it's typed out for you in the description box of this video. Online classes start out at just $10 a month with me. Once again, I wish you all the very best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.